So welcome everybody to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be going over the AQA GCSE Maths paper of June-November 2021, Higher Paper 3, which is a calculator paper. Now as always, I'll include a copy of the paper in a link in the description below for you to download, and I recommend you have attempted it before watching these videos. We go through the answers, and I'll also include a question and topic breakdown so you can see that if you get stuck on any particular question, you can see what topic it refers to. And I'll also include the individual grade boundaries for this paper, and also include the overall grade boundaries for paper 1, 2 and 3 combined. Started in this last paper of the June-November 2021 Higher series. So let's get started. So looking at question 1, it says that b is more than the square root of a. Circle the correct equation. So whether it being b is 3 more than a, then basically what we need to do is take away 3 from b, and that is going to be the same as the square root of a. Now if we do a bit of simple rearranging, we should get that b equals the root of a plus 3, which is our first option. Moving on to question 2, it says circle the largest number. So again, what we want to do is to, now if you can't see this straight away, just write each of the numbers so they've got the same number of numbers after the decimal point. And so this is going to be 0.550, 0.545, and 0.55. And you can see here which one's the biggest 3-digit number. That's going to be our first option. Moving on to question 3, it says that a line has the equation of 3y equals 3x minus 2. Circle the coordinates of the intercept of the y-axis. So as you can see, we've got the x ordinate of being 0. So all we need to do with this is substitute x equals 0 into 3y equals 3x minus 2 and solve for y. So here we end up with 3y equals minus 2 because that cancels out. And then we make y the subject, so we get y equals minus 2/3, which is our fourth option. Moving on to question 4, it says factorise x squared minus 64, and you should be able to spot that this is going to be a difference of 2 squares. So what do you have to square to get x squared? Well, that's going to be x. What do you have to square to get 64? 8. One's a plus, one's a minus, and that matches our third option. Moving on to question 5, it says 6 positive numbers have a mean of 10 and a range of 19. 4 of the numbers are 12, 7, 15 and 3, and it says work out the other 2 numbers for 3 marks. Now this one might be a little bit more time consuming, and sometimes it might be just look at the draw that you get it straight away, or it might be a question that you might have to come back to because there may be some guessing or there may be some mathematical sort of intervention to try and get you that correct answer. So the first thing we could possibly do is looking at the mean, and knowing that there are 6 numbers, that the total sum of all 6 numbers is going to equal 6 times 10, which is 60. So if I just have 2 extra numbers, they've all got to add up to 60. Now the total sum of the 4 numbers given, well, that's going to be adding up those 4 numbers. So 12 plus 7 plus 15 plus 3 gives me a total of 37. So the sum of the 2 missing numbers has got to add up to 23. So from this, now let's have a look at what we know. So 2 numbers that added together equal 23. But remember that the range of all the numbers, all 6 numbers, has got to be 19. So what possible numbers could we have? Well, if we went from 3 as our lowest number, if we add 19 to that, then that's going to give us 22, and 22, and then from that, that's going to be giving us a difference of 1, which is then going to impact our range because 3 is no longer going to be the smallest number, 1 will be, so that won't work. So then the actual correct answer you should have is going to be 2 and 21 as 2 possible numbers there. Moving on to question 6, it says that in a country park there is a house, a museum and a garden. The table shows the prices per person to visit the park. And it says on day 1, 480 people visit the park, 67 visit the garden only, 40% visit the house and museum, 3/8 visit the house only, and the rest visit the museum only. In total, how much do the 480 people pay to visit the park? You may use the Venn diagram. Now, The important thing to note that this question does go onto the page, and the question is asking how much money do they raise. So the first thing we need to do is first of all find out using this information here is find out how many people visited each of the separate sections. So looking at 67, so in terms of visited here, so this is going to be 67, and we can have a cost column there. And we're looking at the house and museum. Well, that's going to be 40%, so that's going to be 40% of 480, which is 0.4 times 480. And if I type that into my calculator, I'm going to get an answer of, let's just do that now, so 4.4 times 480 gives me 192. So the number of people that visited house and museum is 192. Then for the house only, that's going to be 3/8 of 480. And again, of means times, so it's going to do 3/8 multiplied by 480, and that gives me an answer of 180. And the museum only, well, for this, all I've got to do is just take away those numbers. So here, what I've got to do, pull a pen. So for this, I've got 480 minus 67 minus 192 minus 180, and the museum only comes up to a total of 41. So from this, all I've then got to do is then work out the cost of each of these. So if I multiply, let's use a different color. So for this one, I need to multiply by 0 because that's free. This one I need to multiply those two numbers. So let's just get rid of these. So 0, and then 12.5 multiplied by 192, and that gives me 2,400. Then 8 times 180 gives me 1,440. And finally 7 times 41 gives me an answer of 287. So then if I work out the total by adding those three costs together, I should end up with a total cost of 4,127, and there we go. Now they do provide you with a Venn diagram, but it says you may use, so if you do use it, great. If you don't, it's not a problem. But what you should find is that the numbers that I've written in the visited column should go in there. So basically this should be 41, this will be 180, this will be 192. Moving on to question 7, it says that Jeff and Kaz share £270 in the ratio of 2.6 to 1. How much more does how much more than Kaz does Jeff get? So for this, what we need to do is share this amount in this ratio and compare the two amounts. So here we're going to do 200, or let's do 2.6 plus 1, which is 3.6. Then do 270 divided by 3.6. which gives me an answer of 75. So then Jeff is going to have 2.6 times 75, which gives me an answer of £195. And Kaz is going to have 1 times 75, which is £75. So then need to work out the difference, which is 195 minus 75, which gives me an answer of 20. Moving on to question 8, it says the heel of a shoe exerts a pressure of 198 pounds per square inch. Convert this pressure into kilograms per square centimetres. Use 1 pound equals 1.45 kilograms and 1 square inch equals 6.25 square centimetres. Now for these types of questions, what I tend to do is to write the initial units as a fraction. So that's going to be 198 pounds per 1 square inch. Now I want to convert that so that I've got kilograms over centimetre squared. So to convert 198 into kilograms, I'm going to multiply by 0.45. And if I do just that, I get 89.1. And to convert 1 square inch into centimetres, well then I need to multiply that by 6. Oh, don't know what that is. Let me just correct that. 6.25, and so that then becomes 6.25. And then if I work that out on my calculator, I get an answer of 14.256, and that's not been rounded, but if you wanted to round it, that's absolutely fine, but just always make sure that you have stated what you have rounded your answer to. Moving on to question 9, it says that rectangle ABCD split into 4 smaller rectangles. 2 of the smaller rectangles are shaded. 4 to x is the ratio 1 to 2. For the rectangle ABCD, work out the ratio of the shaded area to the unshaded area. Give your answer in its simplest form. So if x is twice the size of 4, so that means that from this we can then work out that x is going to equal 8. So that's going to be 8, and 56 divided by 8 gives me 7, so that's going to be 7. And if this is 4, what times 4 gives you 12? Well, that's going to be 3. So from this, I can then work out what the areas of the unshaded area is going to be. So this area here is going to be 24. And this area here is going to be 7 times 4, which is 28. So here, if we've got the shaded area to the unshaded, and just add up the two totals. So shaded is going to be 24 plus 28, which is 52. And the unshaded, which is 12 plus 56, which gives me 68. Then all I then need to do is to simplify this ratio. And again, you could just do 52 divided by 60 on your calculator, or if you've got a ratio function on the calculators, that's going to work as well. But the correct answer you should have is 13 to 17. Moving on to question 10, it says that a solid shape is drawn on isometric paper. On the centimetre grid, draw the elevation of the shape from A. So we're looking at this side elevation. Now, what you need to do for these is generally make sure that the orientation of your diagram is going to be exactly the same. So here you can see that the blue area is a 2x2. And again, strongly encourage you to use a ruler, but it is massively going to extend the length of this video. You don't need to shade it in, it's just there to help me guide. And then I've got 1x2, which is just there. And just going to shade it in just to show that you can see where I've got that from. Then for B, it says on the grid, draw the plan of the shape. Now you can see that the plan of the shape is a bit like a P shape, so that's exactly what I need to draw. So I need to draw a P shape. So looking at this now, and look, something like this. Now you tend to find that with most of the plans of elevation, it is one of those things that you either get or you don't. But you should have something that looks like this. Now to get the full marks, the orientation of that P does need to be exactly like so. So it needs to be 3 by 5 by 2 by 2 by 1 by 3. Question 11, it says that Eric thinks of a prime number between 20 and 30. His number is x% of 125. Work out one possible value of x. So the first thing we need to do first is identify the prime numbers between 20 and 30. So the possible prime numbers are going to be 23 or 29. Now from this, what we need to do is use this information to then work out the possible values of x. So for this, if I just do it in a little sort of table, so we've got x is his number, and we've divided that by 100, and we multiply that by 125, and that's either going to equal 23, or x over 100 multiplied by 125 is going to equal 29. So all we need to do is just do a bit of rearranging. So here we've got 23 divided by 125, and we multiply that by 100, and we should have an answer of 18.4 as one possible answer. Or alternately, and you definitely don't do both because you would lose marks if you did both. You only need to do one of these. So it's either the top line or the bottom line. So this we just need to do 29 divided by 125 multiplied by 100, and you should have the answer of 23.2. So any of those two answers, but only one of those answers, will be enough to get you the full marks. Moving on to question 12, it says part of a regular polygon with 15 sides is shown. Work out the size of the interior angle. So for this, what we need to know is that the total sum of angles in any polygon, and the formula is 180 n minus 2. And basically where n is the number of sides. So using this formula, we get 180 multiplied by 15 minus 2, which is 13. And I work that out and I should have an answer of 2340 degrees. Now we want to work out what one of those interior angles is going to be. So it's going to be 2340 divided by 15. And that gives us an answer of 156 degrees. Moving on to question 13, it says that a box is in the shape of a half cylinder on top of a cuboid. Work out the volume of the box. And so for this, I would always recommend that you take these compound shapes as two separate shapes. So here we've got shape A, which is the cuboid, and shape B, which is the cylinder prism on top. So, well, actually half the cylinder, and that I should call. So looking at the volume of A, which is just a cuboid, so we just make sure that all the units are the same. So we're all looking at centimeters, which is great. We do 4 times 15 times 26, and that should give us an answer of 1560 centimeter cubed. So the next thing we then need to do is to work out the volume of the half cylinder. So that's going to be, so the volume B, well, it's going to be the surface area of the half cylinder. So that's going to be pi times the radius, which is going to be 13 squared, divided by 2 because it's half a circle, and we multiply that by the length, which is 15. And if I type that all into my calculator, I should end up with an answer of 2535 pi over 2. Now I'm going to leave it in terms of pi because I don't really fancy writing a long set of decimal numbers. So here then the total volume is going to be 2535 over 2 pi plus 1560. And if I type that all into my calculator, I should have an answer of 55420.0 centimeter cubed, and that's rounded to 1 decimal place. Now there's no rounding involved, so technically I could leave my answer in terms of pi. I could leave my answer as this. But just look out for any questions where it does ask you to round, because obviously if it does, then you would lose marks if you do that. Moving on to question 14, it says Phil sells ties and he increases the original price of a tie by 10% to £13.20. A month later, he announces a sale of 10% of all ties. Phil says the ties will be back to the original price because each change was 10%. Is he correct? So let's have a look at the two comparative prices. So let's have a look at the price before. So the before price, and for this we just need to take 10%. Well, if the original price was £13.20, so we need to do reverse percentages. So it's £13.20, and that equates to 90% of, well, the 10% increase. So here we need to divide by 10%. No, we don't. We need to divide by 1.1. And if we do that, we get an answer of £12, because this percentage here, or this number here, represents 110%. So that there is 10%. So we then need to work out the 100% price, which is £12. Now, if we then take off 10% off that, so here then, so the after sale price is then going to be £13.20 multiplied by 0.9 because we're taking off 10%, and that comes up to a price of £11.80. Now, as you can see, that these two prices are different and not the same, so the answer then is no. Moving on to question 15, it says that a bias spinner can land on A, B or C. The table shows probabilities in terms of K of A, B and C. Work out the probability of B. Now with these particular tables, because these events are all exclusive, say that the fact that there's no other possible outcome, so all of these three probabilities need to add up to 1. So we've got 0.5k plus 7k minus 0.15 plus 2.5k, and they should all add up to 1 because there's no possible other outcome. Now if we neaten all of this, then what do we get? Well, we get 10k minus 0.15 equals 1. So 10k equals 1.15, so k equals 0. 0.15 divided by 10. I should know this already. Obviously, it's 1.15. So from this, what we can then do is then the question then says to work out the value of b, or the probability of b. So the probability of b is 7 times k, which is 0.115. Take away 0.15, and if I type that all into my calculator, I should end up with an answer of 6.55. Moving on to question 16, it says that P is the 0.214, Q is the 0.68, and R is the 0.25. Use the gradients to show that angle PQR is not right angle. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to state what rule I've used. Now, whether you get marked for it is dependent on the mark scheme, but I'm going to say that if PQR is right angled, then angle PQR is going to equal 90 degrees. Now, if that is the case, so therefore that the PQ and QR are therefore perpendicular, and therefore the gradient of PQ times the gradient of QR equals -1. Now, that's one proof to show that two lines are meet at 90 degrees, or that an angle is 90 degrees, or perpendicular, I should say. Or you could use the method which is probably more renowned at GCSE level, where it's showing one gradient is the negative reciprocal of another. Now that is absolutely fine. This is basically a translated version to a more A-level standard. So the first thing I need to do is to work out the gradient of those two lines. So the gradient of PQ. Now the formula I'm going to use is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which is basically the difference in y over the difference in x, which is how you work out the gradient of each of those 2 points. So looking at this, if I use q as my second coordinate, so that's going to be 8 and 6, and then I've got 14 and 2. And if I take away those two numbers together or work out the grade, I'm going to end up with -6 over 4, which gives me -3 over 2. Then if I then work out the gradient of QR, I've then got R, which is 5, 2, and I've got Q, which is 8, 6, and I take those two numbers away, I get -3 over -4, which is 3 over 4, and these are my two gradients. So then to finish this off, I can say that as -3 over 2 multiplied by 3 over 4 is not, I would say, is not equal to 1, -1 I should say, then PQR is not right angle. So something along those lines. What you could say is that this gradient here is not the negative reciprocal of that gradient, or vice versa, and that would also get you sufficient marks to say you don't need to go in so much to the proof. It might be wasting time, might be completely totally unnecessary, but me explaining the answer, I think it's quite essential. Moving on to question 17, it says m squared is greater than 9. Circle the possible values of m. Now, because we're looking at squares and we're looking at inequalities, that m needs to be bigger than 3, or m needs to be less than -3. So I'm just looking for which of these 4 possible values fill either of these two categories, and the only one that does is -7 over 2, which is -3.5. Question 18, it says simplify. So here, because we're multiplying and the base numbers are the same, we add the powers. So 1 plus 0 is 1, which is the same as w, which is my option. Question 19, it says the equation of the circle is x squared plus y squared equals 11. Work out the length of the diameter. Well, the radius squared is 11, so that means that the radius has got to be root 11. And to find the diameter, I've got to multiply, what times there? I need to multiply the radius by 2. So therefore, it's going to be 2 times root 11, which is my second option. Then moving on to question 20, it says that A over B is 3C and B over C is 2. Work out the value of A when C equals 8. So let's have a look at this. So this, what we're going to do is we're going to use this second one. So we've got B over C equals 2. Now we know that C equals 8. So here we've got B over 8 equals 2. So therefore B equals 16. And from this, what we can then do is use this. So we've got A over B equals 3C. We know that B is 16. So A over B, which is 16. And this is going to be 3 times C. So that's going to be 3 times 8. So we get A over 16 equals 24. So A equals 24 multiplied by 16, which is 384. So looking at question 21, it says here is some information about the ages of babies at a clinic. And the question is asking us to draw a histogram to represent the information. And they're given us a table to help find the calculations to then translate that into our histogram. So the first thing we need to do, or the ultimate thing we need to do, is to calculate the frequency density. Now we do that by using the formula of that the frequency density is equal to the frequency divided by the class width. Now the class width is just the upper bound, take away the lower bound. So for the first row it's going to be 5, second is 5, the third is 10, and the fourth is 30. Then to work out the frequency density, all I need to do is just simply divide those numbers in the second column by the numbers in my class width. So this then gives us an answer of 3.6, 4.6, 1.7, and 0.7. Then to draw my histogram, I need to plot the ages going across the x-axis against the frequency density, which is going up the vertical axis. And then I'm just going to just plot those against those, in which I should have something that looks like this. And again, you want to make sure that your columns are neatly done with a ruler, as you can see I've done here this time, and it all matches up with the table and the heights from them as well. Then moving on to question 22, it says that a sequence of patterns is made using horizontal sticks and vertical sticks. The table shows the number of horizontal sticks and vertical sticks in each pattern. And it says what fraction of the total number of sticks in pattern N are horizontal. Give your answer in terms of N. So for this, let's first of all find what pattern N is going to be without using a highlighter. So let's get rid of that. So we've got N. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at a link between the pattern number and the number of horizontal sticks. And you can see hopefully that to get from this number to this number, all I need to do is multiply this number by 2. Now for the vertical sticks, what I need to get from this number to that number, so from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, well I just need to add 1 to the original number. So then if I then work out the total number of sticks, that's going to be these middle two columns, the second and the third column added together. So if I add the bottom two, that's going to give me 3n plus 1. Now the question's asking me to write down the fraction of the total number of sticks in pattern N are horizontal. So what I'm going to be doing is then using this here over this. So then the final answer then is going to be 2n over 3n plus 1. And moving on to question 23, A, it says that the equation of a curve is y equals 16 to the power of x. Circle the point that lies on the curve. Now for this, all I need to do is just substitute the x value and see if it gives me the y ordinate as an answer. So here I'm going to have 16 squared. Now does that equal 32? No, it does not, so that's not correct. I then do 16 to the power of 32. Does that equal 2? No, it does not. I then do 16 squared. Does that equal 256? That does. And 16 to the power of 256 does not equal 2. So the correct answer is going to be my third option. The next question, 23b, it says on a different point on the curve has a y ordinate of 1/16. What is the x ordinate? So if I just substitute those numbers in, so I've got 1 over 16 equals, and it's going to be 16 to the power of x. So hopefully using knowledge of rules of indices and reciprocals, you should know that x has got to equal -1 because this is the reciprocal of this. Then moving on to question 24, it says AB equals 3, where A is an integer, B is a proper fraction, and it says work out one possible pairs of the values of A and B. So the key thing is that B has got to be a fraction. So we're going to be using roots to work that out. So what rooted to what gives you 3? Now the possible most common one I would say is the square root of 9. So possible answers of A and B that you could give are going to be the square root of 9, and that's going to be the power of half. The 27 cube rooted is, that's going to be 27 to the power of a third, and 81 to the power of a quarter. So any of those combinations would be fine to get you the 1 mark. Moving on to question 25, it says expand and simplify these triple brackets. Now for this, there's several ways in which you could start. Now I'm going to start by expanding these two first. I've got x minus 3, x minus 3, and then I'm going to expand those two things out. Now you can either do it in your head or you could work it out. That's what we should have when we expand these two brackets here. And now what I need to do is now expand all of this. So I'm going to multiply x by those three things. So I get x cubed plus 7x squared plus 10x. I then multiply the minus 3 out. So I end up with minus 3x squared minus 21x minus 30. And then all I've then got to do is join those together. Now note how I've set my work out. It just makes it a lot easier for me to add up those common terms rather than writing it all in one line. And there is my final answer. Moving on to question 26, it says here are two similar cones. Slightly, if I can. Here are two similar cones, and it says the surface area of cone A is 2 meters squared. The surface area of cone B is 4.5 meters squared. Work out the ratio of the radius of cone A to the radius of cone B. Give your answer in the form of 1 to n. So for this, what we need to do is, as it mentions the word similar, we're looking at similar area and volume. So the area scale factor is going to be 4.5 over 2, because that's the 2 bits of information that I know. And that's going to be the equivalent of k squared. Now the length scale factor, which is related to the radius, is therefore going to be the square root of 4.5 over 2, because the length scale factor is just simply going to be k. Now if I type that into my calculator, I work out that the length scale factor is actually going to be 1.5. So therefore, if the radius of the cone was to, let's say, be 1, then the radius of cone B is going to be 1 times 1.5. So that's going to be 1.5, and then lo and behold, I've got my radius, my ratio in the format of what they wanted, so it's going to be 1 to 1.5. Now moving on to question 27, it says in the diagram D to E equals A, D to H equals B, H to G equals 8B, and the ratio of E to X to H is in the ratio of 3 to 1, and E to F to G is in the ratio of 1 to 3. And the question 27a says show that dx equals 1/4 A plus 3/4 B. Now for this, what we need to do is heavily marked. I've just kind of zoomed out from the question, so hopefully you can still see the question. So first of all, let's work out, now what we're actually wanting to work out is this distance here. So it's that distance there that we're actually wanting to work out. And we'll do that by going from D to H to X. So if I just write D to X equals D to H and H to X. Now looking at this, we can only see that D to H is going to be B, so that one's relatively quite easy. However, to work out what H to X is, I'm going to need to use this ratio here. Going to be using this ratio here. Now from this we know that H to X is going to be 1. Well, first of all, let's work out what E to H is going to be. Now E to H is going to be minus A plus B. So therefore, using this ratio, we can then say that E to X is going to equal, and it's going to be 3 lots of minus a plus b divided by 4. And h to x to h is going to be 1 part of minus a plus b over 4. Now if I'm wanting h to x, I need to reverse this, so that's plus, and it's going to be minus x to h. So therefore I've got b plus, and then if I reverse the signs of everything in this here, I'm going to end up with positive a over 4 plus a minus, rather, b over 4. Now if I then expand the brackets out, so I get b plus a over 4 minus b over 4. Now what I could do is convert this into a fraction just to make it easier, but I could just simply type it into my calculator. That should be a 4 then, or b. And if I simplify all of that, then what do I end up with? Well, I'm going to end up with a over 4 plus 3b over 4, which can be rewritten as a quarter a plus 3/4 of b, which is what they were wanting me to plot to find. Now I think that's quite a lot for 2 marks, but again, marks are either awarded for how long it takes or how much work you should do, and I reckon that it is possible that to be done within 2 minutes. So now let's have a look at B. So the question 27b says, if dfx is dfx on a straight line, you show working out to support your answer. Now the key statement you need to write is that if dfx is on a straight line, then df will be a factor or multiple of xf. So this is the fact that or the proof that I'm going to be using to see if dfx is on a straight line. Now for this, I know that dx, I've already showed that from part A, is going to be equal to a over 4 plus 3b over 4. If you prefer to have a quarter a plus 3/4 b, that's absolutely fine. So let me just put a little box around that to begin with. Now the next thing I then need to find is what xf is going to be. Now xf is going to be equal to xe plus e to f. Now x to e is 1 minus e to x, which I found in the previous part. So that's going to be plus 3a over 4 plus minus 3b over 4. And again, I'm not sure where I've got that from. It was from here, from this bit here. Then moving on to the next bit, so let me just pull that in brackets. Then to work out e to f, well, e to f is going to be a quarter of e to g. And is going to be a quarter of e to g. And so that's going to be a quarter of minus a plus 9b. And again, I got that straight from the diagram. So e to g is going from here down there, so it's minus a and then plus 9b. Go back to that, and they're both need to be added. So then neatening all of this bit here up, I get minus a quarter a plus 9 over 4b. Now I then need to add these two things together, in which I'm going to have colours, so like orange. So here then, what I've then got is x to f is going to be equal to 3a over 4 minus 3b over 4 plus minus a quarter, 4 there, minus a quarter a plus 9 over 4b. Then if I neaten all of that up, I get an answer of a half a plus 3 over 2b. So that's what xf equals. Now what I now need to do is compare this with this. So as you can see, that to get from dx to df, all I've got to do there is multiply it by 2. So as 2dx equals xf, therefore dxf is straight. And something along those lines should be good enough for you to get 4. Then moving on to question 28, it says A equals 4.72 rounded to 3 significant figures and B is 158 rounded to 3 sig fig. Work out the upper bound of A over B. You must show you're working out. Now for this, to get our maximum fraction, what we need is the biggest number at the top and we need the smallest number at the bottom. So now let's just work out what the limits are going to be, the upper and lower bound of these are going to be. Now A has been rounded up to the nearest hundredth, so that's going to be 4.72 plus or minus 0.005. And B has been rounded to the nearest unit, so that's going to be 158 plus or minus 0.5. So to get the upper bound of the biggest value of A, that's going to be 4.72 plus 0.005, which gives me 4.725. That's the upper bound. And the lower bound of B is going to be 158 minus 0.5, which is 157.5. So then if I do the upper bound of the fraction, A over B, that's going to be 4.725 over 157.5, and that should give me an answer of 0.03. Moving on to question 29, it says that A, B and C are 3 points on the circumference of a circle of O, and BD and CD are tangents of the circle. ABDC is a kite, and angle BDC is X. And it says prove that AOB is 45 minus X over 4. So this is the angle that I'm needing to work with. It's always worth just kind of highlighting to make sure that you know which angle that we are working with. So let's go through writing this all out. Now this is going to be a complete mess because I want it all on the same diagram. So let me just label this as number 1. So here we know that OBD is going to be equal to OCD, which is equal to 90 degrees. And the reason for that, and that angle there is this, is because radius and tangents meet at 90 degrees. So we know that this angle here is going to be 90. So let's just write that down. So that's 90. That's 90. So therefore, what we then know is that, so therefore angle O or BOC plus angle BDC must also then add up to 180 because angles in a quadrilateral add up to 360. So if angle BDC is X equals 180 and BOC, so then BOC is going to be 180 minus X. So I can write this angle here as 180 minus X. Now from that, what we then know is number 2, is that this angle here, let's use a different color, this angle here is going to be half, so BAC is going to be half of the angle of BOC, and the reason for that is because it's an arrowhead. So therefore this angle here is going to be 90 minus a half X. Then if I split this angle in half, we can see that step 3 is that triangle ABO is isosceles as two sides are the same. So they're both radius. So this is going to be an isosceles triangle. Now this angle here, so for number 4, that BAC or BAO, is therefore going to be 90 minus a half x divided by 2, which is 45 minus a quarter x. So therefore, as this angle here is the same as that angle there, which is what we're trying to find, that means that ABO is equal to 45 minus x over 4, which is what they wanted me to prove. Moving on to question 30, it says that a sphere has a radius of r centimeters and an approximate value of r can be found using the iterative formula of what shows. It says starting values r1 equals 7, work out the value of r2 and r3. Now for this, I am going to need to use my calculator, especially as this is a calculator paper. So all I need to do here is, right, so for R2, it's going to be the square root of 239 over 7, which is a previous answer. And then R3 is going to be 239 over the answer of R2. So let me just show you how you can do this on your calculator. Let's just get the calculator back up. So if I start by pressing R equals 7, so R equals, that's my first answer stored in my calculator. Then what I'm going to do is enter this formula. So I've got the square root of a fraction, and I've got 239, and underneath the answer which is saved. So that's where 7 is saved. So the first answer is 583, and it says, does it say anything about rounding? No, it doesn't. So I'm just going to write down the whole answer. Let's just write down all of that. So I get 5.843188953. And then if I bring the calculator back, I then press equals again, and it gives me my next value, and that's 3.95, so 6.395492371. If it did say round your answer to a couple of places, then that's fine. Now, if I bring my calculator back to work out B, which is the last question, it says continue the iteration to work out the radius to 1 decimal place. So what I'm looking for is if I keep pressing equals, I'm wanting this answer here to stabilize to 1 decimal place. I'm pressing equals to stop it moving, and you can see it does stop. So then the final answer to 1 decimal place then is going to be 6.2, and there is the end of this paper. Now I will include the individual grade boundaries for this individual paper, so you can see what mark you've got on paper 3, but I'll also include, if you've done paper 1 and 2 and now 3, you can add up your total scores and see what your overall grade is and compare them to the overall grade boundaries of this series.